Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Run It Back, and I am live with Olivier Busquet to go back into the archives and watch some Season 7 Poker After Dark 150K cash game. We've got a lot of talking to do. I haven't seen Olivier in quite some time, but not only do we have exciting poker action to watch, because this was a really exciting cash game. You guys are going to be able to see some big pots, but also Olivier has recently started a podcast, which has been very insightful. A lot of things that, everyone can learn from it, but especially learning about your journey has been fascinating as well. So first and foremost, how are you doing? How are you holding up during quarantine, and what's going on in your life?
Yeah. Hey, brother. I'm doing great. It's kind of an odd time to like be thriving, but quarantine has been really good for me. Online poker is booming in New Jersey, and I've developed this really kind of schedule, like routine that I'm just like doing well in, and yeah, I'm thriving during the quarantine, which is, yeah, it's bizarre, it's almost perverse, but yeah, things are going well. I miss live poker too. I obviously miss the World Series and seeing everyone, and I miss live poker. But there is something almost comforting about the fact that I know I'm not going anywhere for a long time, and I'm just going to be home, and I'm just doing my thing. So yeah, things are good.
Wow, that's good to hear. For the people just tuning in for the very first time, this show takes you back, watching some epic poker action. I've been doing this show basically since quarantine started. We've had Moneymaker on, Joe Hashem. We have had Antonio Esfandiari and Lex Veldhuis on. You can see all those on demand as well. But today we are diving live into the action with Olivier to watch some old school poker after dark. I see a big smile on your face, Olivier. First of all, what are you thinking when you see this?
It's crazy. I mean, I guess this was close to 10 years. Oh my God. I guess this was close to 10 years ago. And yeah, I mean, it's just funny to see myself. I mean, seeing it's like cool to see everyone, but to see myself is funny. It's also, I actually don't have a beard there. I don't have a beard now. I think I've had a beard 99% of the days between this day and today. I like just shaved it off. But I'm just like so skinny, and I have this long hair, and I'm so young, and I have no idea how to play poker. It's just really funny.
So when you say no idea how to play poker, is it in the context of that era, or is it in the context of what you know now?
No, yeah, it's in the context of what I know now. I mean, at the time, whatever. I mean, I played fine, I think. But obviously, the poker world has changed a lot, and we've all gotten much better. But I mean, I think I'm much better than I was a year ago. So like, this was just, especially I'm playing cash too. Like, I played zero cash at this point in my career. Well, no, I guess I had played some at the very beginning, but I was mostly playing heads up, sit and goes in tournaments. And now, since I moved to New Jersey 4 years ago, I play basically exclusively cash, and I've really done a decent amount of studying now in cash, and I've tried to really improve. And so it's just funny. It's funny to see. Oh my God, I'm so skinny too.
So tell us the story of how you ended up on Poker After Dark. This was the 7th season. For people that are watching this at home and wondering, what's the story here with Poker After Dark? Well, all 7 seasons are available on PokerGo. So if you just want to watch Poker After Dark without us talking over it, be my guest. Go to PokerGo right now. But Olivier, what's your story? How did you end up becoming part of this lineup?
Yeah, so so for the first few years, I only played online, and I used to love the World Poker Tour. There weren't a lot of poker shows on, and after a while of watching the World Poker Tour, I started to kind of realize that online poker was actually relatively tough compared to live poker, and that the tournament seemed softer than I expected. And so I started to play some live tournaments. And then relatively early in my live tournament career, I won a WPT. I just kind of luck boxed this huge field at the Borgata. And one of my childhood friends was basically doing some, I guess it's hard to explain exactly what he was doing, but he's basically like an agent. He had some like hip hop artists and some DJs, and then he just started basically thought that he could help me get some, especially at that time, people, whether if you remember or if you weren't in the poker world then, there was a lot of money being thrown around by some of these companies, sponsorships, patch deals, like all types of stuff. And so we were working together. He became like my manager, which just sounds funny to say, but he became like my manager. And one of his brother and my brother went to high school together. They were actually friendly in the same grade. And one of my and like somebody that they knew from that time is Dan Gaddy, who's like one of the producers of like one of the now he's like runs like so much, but at the time I think he was I don't know what his role was, but he was working for Maury doing some production on the show. And so I had this connection to Dan, and I won this tournament, and so that turned into I forget if it turned into the NBC Heads Up first and then this, or this and then the NBC Heads Up. I think it was this first and then the NBC Heads Up, but it turned into those two things that I ended up playing. And so yeah, so I got invited to the show, and I think I was also an idiot. Like I was taking pieces that were like probably way too big. I think I had half of myself in this cash game, which was a lot for the amount of money it's a lot anyway, but for the amount of money I had, it was too much.
Yeah, so for the people watching this right now, there's a 150K buy-in cash game. Most people are sitting with a lot more. And there is a segment that you taped with Ali Najad where you tell him you brought 2 bullets, you brought 300K, you showed the money on your desk inside your Aria hotel room.
That's ridiculous. I remember that now. And it's funny because Ali and I became commentators together after that for Alpha 8 and good friends. But it's funny to hear you say that now. It sounds so ridiculous. He came to my hotel room and I showed him the cash. It's absurd.
Yeah, you did, and you joked about how the almonds were so expensive at the Aria. And then, take me back to that mindset of taking a big shot like that. Was it sort of, you having the common disrespect for live players and just showing up sort of wanting to walk all over them? Was that sort of the attitude, or?
No, I was super nervous. I was super nervous. But I mean, both because there was, I still am a little bit, but was more than a bit self-conscious. And so the camera and Poker After Dark was a big show. A lot of people saw it. So I was definitely a bit nervous. And then, again, cash games weren't my thing. And these guys have so much experience. I definitely didn't come in like arrogant at all. And I think part of the reason I took like a big shot was just because I thought my EV in poker was very high. I was doing quite well online. I just won this tournament, and it just seemed like the money at the time. The money in poker just seemed never ending. It just seemed like it was just if things didn't go well. Okay, I just grind for a month and win it back. Like no big deal. And also I just didn't know anything. I was not particularly smart in general. Look at those cufflinks in that watch. Jesus. Like obviously I wasn't very smart with spending money.
You had spider.
And it's funny too the way I'm dressed. It's like now if I were to go in a cash game, I would never dress like this. But at the time I wasn't married, but I was dating the woman that I ended up marrying. I'm now divorced, and she had a strong influence on like my quote unquote image and how I presented myself. And she really wanted the kind of like debonair, like well-dressed type thing. And like, I thought it was cool, but it really wasn't like my natural way of being. So it's also funny to see myself with that vest, which I just would never, ever wear now.
And you have the spiders on your cufflinks, and you're wearing a gold, was it a gold AP watch? I mean,
it's an AP. Yeah, the AP, I always loved that AP just because I just think that watch is like, it's just a classic kind of understated nice watch. I don't own nice watches anymore because I think as a concept they're a bit just not my thing. But those cufflinks, those spider cufflinks, like I thought those were really cool too. I didn't buy those; those were actually a gift. They were like some friend of my ex's like designed them, and they're like really, you don't really see that kind of thing very often. And so there is something cool about that. But just in general, this like focus on on the way I'm dressed and presenting myself, but then also doing it in a way in which there's a kind of, there's this implication of financial success or whatever. That's just something that is just really anathema now to the way that I am. And I think, at the time, I mean, I wasn't that young. I was probably 27, but I was still just figuring some stuff out. And yeah, I mean, for me, there's a really big difference between whatever it was then, 28 and 38. Those spiders, they're ridiculous.
I think it's awesome that you're getting such a laugh out of seeing yourself from 10 years ago. For the people in the chat, please let us know if you have any questions for Olivier, both past, current, or future related. We can tackle all of them. And Sanjay asked the question on YouTube already. He said, according to Olivier, who was the best player at that table with the information that you had back then, thinking about sort of what this lineup was like?
That's an interesting question. I mean, all these guys have their own strengths. I think the guy that intimidated me the most was Viffer. I think he just has a kind of intimidating way about him, a little bit at the poker table. Plus, he had he had online experience, and he was sitting with the most money, and I think had the most confidence. But at the same time, honestly, like all these guys, and Greg and Ellie, like they're just like Ed Howard, like just legends of the poker world. I mean, absolute legends. And Phil Locke is like, I've always found Phil to be just unpredictable and difficult to play with. I mean, he's in his own world kind of, and like sometimes he plays incredibly nitty, and then sometimes he just goes absolutely wild. And I think if you have a more kind of formal approach to the way you play, then like you just kind of know, it's easier to deal with that. But I wasn't as, like booked up and as theoretically based in the way I played. And so that kind of unpredictable style, like just made me, I wasn't as comfortable.
Right. So you were, especially back then, Liv B, the online high stakes heads up sit and go specialist, and you had made quite a name for yourself outside of the live success that you ended up having. It all came from that, heads up sit and go online background. So
Yes.
Take me back to that era where you were at your peak. What was that like to be sort of, I guess, on top of the world within that niche segment of the online poker world?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, that, it was a little bit of a big fish, small pond. Like you said, it's a niche thing. And I was fully aware that there was a kind of talent cap in the heads up sit and go world, at least for a while. So like, when I first started playing online, first of all, 3-6 didn't exist. You went from 2-4 and jumped up to 5-10, which was a big jump in cash. And at the biggest stakes were 25-50, and the biggest heads up sit and goes were 5Ks. And then slowly over time, the cash games limits went up, right? 50, 100, 100, 200, 200, 400, went all the way to 500, 1K, right? Real heaven on full tilt. It was insane. But heads up sit and goes never really went up. There was like literally, I think like a 1 day or 2 days or something where PokerStars experimented with like, I think it was a 10K heads up sit and go. And then they just got rid of that right away. I think they didn't want to break players too fast. So I think as people got better, the most talented and just best poker players were playing cash games at the time. As cash game limits went up and up, and you could make more and more money. And also for a while, in the beginning, it took me a little bit like Ike got sponsored, and then Ike started playing them. Ben 86 didn't get sponsored, but Ben Tollering started playing them, and he crushed me. And so like if some like cash game guys, really good players, like decided to try to play heads up sit and goes, I was like fully aware that they would get as good as me or better than me with a little bit of study, especially because I wasn't doing any studying. I was just kind of learning by trial and error, some brute force. So yeah, I mean, it was a tough time for me in poker. I mean, my poker, like I've kind of transitioned in my experience with poker. And at the very beginning, it was I think quite difficult and unhealthy. And then there was a kind of middle period where I would tilt a lot, and I was generally like, I was happy, but I wasn't like, my relationship with poker was very complicated. And then it's more in the last like kind of 5 to 7 years that I think turned my relationship with poker into like a really, really like positive force in my life. So at that time that you're asking me about, it was more complicated. Um, I was enjoying it, but I was obsessed with it. I was playing probably 100-hour weeks. I was doing very little else. And then that started to change a little bit when I met my ex-wife, and started to have a little bit more balance in my life. But right before this happened, right before I won the WPT, I was grinding just every day, all day.
Wow, that's insane. For the people who are watching on YouTube and Facebook, we had a few connection issues. I think it came through on one side, maybe not on the other, but it looks to be all stable again. So if you missed anything, just keep watching and go back in time to catch the beginning of the show if you had some issues there. But that's really eye-opening, Olivier, for you to be able to have that perspective now to look back on this period in which, from the outside, for me as someone who worked in poker, was like, oh wow, this guy's on top of the world. Like, he's just killing it, playing high stakes. That's like the dream life, right? I was there in Barcelona when you and Dan went heads up in the high roller. So no one really probably could have seen what was going on behind the scenes. How long did it take for you to realize that a change was needed, or was that mostly just because of your relationship that it sort of slowly grew in that sort of way?
Well, yeah, the Barcelona time was interesting because a lot had happened already at that time. And winning that tournament I needed to win that tournament financially. Um, but that was kind of the middle, somewhat the middle of my transition. It was a very, very interesting time personally for me. Because I don't know, this gets very personal, but my ex-wife was pregnant at the time, and I thought that I was going to be a father, and that's why she didn't come with me on that trip. It's the only trip in Europe she's ever not come on. And then she had a miscarriage when I came back, and that was very, very difficult for us. And so that I that was that tournament was interesting. It was an interesting time. It was great for me and Dan to get heads up and to obviously to win. And then, that was a very difficult time for us afterwards. And then, things with my ex started to change. And then eventually I got divorced. And then after my divorce, I had this fight, which really helped me. But I knew that things needed to change very early on, because I was very unhappy. Like, I used to get quite upset when I would lose, and that emotional difficulty would stay with me, and it would influence a lot of things. It would influence like my eating and sleeping and socializing, and it would just kind of consume me. And I knew, I sought a therapist relatively early in my poker career, because I was like, I need to deal with this on some level. I need to understand what's going on. I need to kind of try to figure out where my anger is coming from. And so that was early in this kind of recognition that I needed to change something, but it just took some time, and it took some just maturing. And also, poker is difficult. It's difficult. It's difficult in a lot of ways, but I think it really depends on the person. And I think not having any structure, not having any oversight, right? Like, if you like wake up hungover and start to play, there's no one there to be like, hey man, why don't you take a break? Or why don't you just take the day off? Or if you start tilting and playing terribly, there's no like automatic button that shuts your computer off or shuts your thing off. Whereas, like, let's say you were a trader working at a hedge fund or at a bank, and like they have stop losses. And if you lose a certain amount of money, it's like you're done. Like, you cannot trade anymore. They don't let you trade, because they understand how this works. They understand the psychology and the emotion behind it. And because in poker, like, it's just all you. The how much you play, when you play, how much you study, if you study, the way you manage your own finances and personal discipline, which tournaments you play, which hotels you stay at, everything you have to organize by yourself. And so for some people, I think that's that's easy for them, or it's just not it's great or whatever. But for other people, it's a big challenge. Obviously, for other people, the actual strategy of the game of playing well, that's a huge challenge, and it's very difficult, and it takes a lot. For me, that was always a bit easier. But I think one thing that I always saw in other people that I never fully, I think, was able to take advantage of or was able to incorporate into my poker life was creating a kind of social support, a kind of community, like a group of friends or people that swapped with each other and looked out for each other. I think playing heads up sit and goes gave me a very kind of me against the world mentality. When you play heads up, it's like everybody is your opponent. Whereas if you play in the tournaments or in cash games, it's like there's you can it's easy to kind of root for other people and to make friends because not everyone that you encounter is someone you're trying to beat specifically all the time heads up. And especially heads up sit and goes is different from heads up cash. Like in heads up cash, if you're like, oh, this guy's good, I don't want to play him, then you just one guy sits at one table and you sit at another table and you both wait for opponents. But heads up sit and goes, it's a battle, or at least at the time, it was a battle for the lobbies.
Right.
So if one guy was better than you, like that guy could really, really impede your progress or really make a problem for you. And so it was really there was a real winner take all aspect and a real king of the hill dynamic going on. And I mean, it wasn't necessarily the case, but that was very much the way I interpreted it. And then also when I was with my ex, I spent a lot of time with her and didn't make a lot of efforts to socialize with people. And so I think over time, I just felt a bit isolated in the context of the poker world. And I think seeing some other people, the way that they've kind of created their experience, they've been able to benefit a lot from sharing knowledge with other people, supporting one another, financially reducing their variance by taking pieces and swapping and all that stuff, which I think makes the experience much easier, much smoother. And if people, are interested or want to get into poker, I think that's a big underplayed aspect of it is trying to create a community or a social system that's supportive. Because there are so many ups and downs and so many things, just like if you were, if a couple people live in Toronto and they're going to go to the Bahamas, you're just like, oh, what flight are you on?
Right.
And then you just organize it together and you go. You know what I mean? It's just it just makes the experience so much better than having to do everything on your own.
Right. So then now it seems as though from listening to your podcast, you're set up well in New Jersey, you grind online, you got a good routine going. You talked about, 3 hours is sort of the span of your focus, and then you take a break and you play another session later in the day. So did it take long for you to find that balance? And how did you get to find sort of a solution to, the problems that you were encountering earlier on?
It was it was a transition and a step-by-step process. I mean, I think I developed a bit more self-awareness, and I think one thing that was big for me was a bit of self-acceptance. I think just as an example, I know that I have a tendency, I can tilt, just as a very basic example. I don't tilt that much anymore, but especially in earlier in my career, I would tilt a lot. And so I would try to think of ways, here's a perfect example. Sometimes I would get into chat wars with people.
We know. We all remember those.
Yeah. And so one of the things that would happen is that I would start to, those chats would stay with me. And I would start to feel like, I was like, why am I getting involved with this? Why did I say that? And it would make me tilt more. It was like an amplifier of my negative emotional experience. And so one day I just had the idea and I was just like, I didn't just randomly get the idea. Sometimes I would curse at people and then they would report me and the site would ban my chat. And I'd be like, oh, this is bullshit or whatever. And then there were times when my chat would come back. And I remember having this feeling where I was like, I don't want my chat to come back. And I remember thinking that I was like, oh, this was kind of nice when they banned my chat. And then I got the idea and I was like, maybe I can just ask them to just ban it for me. And so I was like, I emailed the sites and I was like, hey, can you just remove my ability to chat? Just take away my chat privileges. And the sites were like, okay, sure. It's like you press a single button for a guy, it's like, and then I couldn't chat. And then I was like, oh, this is actually really nice. And I never get into any chat issues with anyone. And it's so for me, it was like sometimes when I tell people that, I'm like a little bit embarrassed. Like, oh, you can't even control your chat when you play. Like, how silly is that? How dumb is that, right? Like, how old are you? But then I just came to a point where I just started to accept it. It's like, hey, I get distracted by chat. It annoys me. It irritates me. Sometimes it gets me to tilt. So I just get rid of it.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to be like, oh, I'm going to be the perfect person who can have, who can do everything exactly right. It's just like, I accept this part of me and I try to work around it. That's it. And that's just one example. It's a kind of obvious one to people who know my history. But in general, I have plenty of different examples like that, where I'm just like, instead of getting down on myself for not being the kind of perfect player and the way that I think I should be, I just accept there's certain aspects, certain things I'm good at, certain things that I need some help with, certain things that, I just kind of, it's like I'm managing myself. It's like there is no, you don't have a coach or a manager, so you have to be your own manager. And so I do that. And so, yeah, like scheduling my sessions, scheduling my life, honestly, like was a big difference maker for me. Part of that came from the fight, because I had training in the morning and training in the evening, and those were scheduled, and I was much more precise with what I was eating, and I just had to develop a discipline from that experience that I didn't have before, and then I started to translate that discipline into other aspects of my life, and now I live a very, very disciplined life, but I really enjoy it.
But do you need that discipline in order to function? Is that what you sort of concluded? Like, if I have good discipline and good routines, then I'm able to function the way I want to function.
Yeah, I think it's just once I think I understood the value of structure, I understood that I was able to thrive in a self-imposed kind of disciplinary routine. And so I felt really good. I was performing better. Every part of my life just started to improve. And again, like we were saying before, it's like most people, they live in some externally imposed structure. If you have a job or you go to school, there is a structure there for you. And that structure is kind of organized in a way that lets you eat at certain times and sleep and all this basic stuff. It's like seems so basic, and for some people probably is, but for me wasn't. And so especially like in certain sessions or certain times when I was playing, I would just not eat, or I would eat terribly, or I would not sleep, or I would sleep terribly, or I would not exercise, or I would go too far. And so imposing some structure helped me not go too far. And also, there's another thing where oftentimes when I would win, I would feel like I didn't want to play anymore. I was like, oh, let me bank this win. Let me enjoy this day. And so what I would do is my sessions when I would win would be very short. My sessions when I would lose would be very long. And that's like not a great way to do it. And at the same time, even now, like if I win, like yesterday, I had a really, really good session, and I just quit. And I was just like, sometimes I quit because I know that my tendency is to become more conservative after I win. It's like I was like, oh, I don't want to lose what I've won. And like if you ask a lot of pros, they'd be like, oh no, you should keep playing when you win. And in general, I play more because I have a self-imposed structure. But I also accept the fact that my bias is to play more conservatively. So yeah, I could try to manage that, control for it, but at the end of the day, I have to accept it. And so I don't try to push things in certain situations. So like, let's say I'm playing heads up 25-50. If I win a couple buy-ins, I might say to myself, okay, I don't want to stop playing because I want to make sure I stick to my routine, but I don't have to play this anymore. I can now play 6 max 5-10 and just grind and just like bank a good day, but make sure I still get my volume in. I don't have to take the variance of the 25-50 heads up and go up and down and have that experience. It's just a way of managing myself and over time, just developing a sense through experience of how I operate and how I operate best and what my vulnerabilities are. Because I think self-awareness is so important in not just how good you are, right? But also, I'm just looking at this hand real quick.
Let's watch this hand. We haven't watched the hand yet. Let's turn up the volume and listen to what's being said.
telling you, that's why I love poker. Because if you jiggle the waves, if you just deposit money you know you can't get back unless you like have a hand later, sickness will happen. Look at how that 12, 24, 48, 12, all in, you know, I love that.
What is he talking about?
Incredible.
Yeah, I think this is just 3-bet, and then he just 4-bet this. And I was like, oh man, it's so close. It's so close. I don't think I would fold jacks here.
And it's also for stacks because he's all in for 188, and I think you
Yeah,
have,
I don't even have that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I think that you got like 200, right?
It's okay.
Yeah, that's close.
So when you see this, can you recall?
This I'm actually happy about. I'm happy about this.
Right.
Because I think the spot, I don't think this spot changes, but I don't think the strategy of this spot changes. Like, I don't think I've learned anything about this spot. I think this is a kind of spot where I'm like, I know that this hand is like 2 nines. I don't think it's close, and 2 queens is not close. 2 jacks and 2 tens are like close, and when I have tens, like he can easily have jacks like he does. Obviously, he's got ace king a lot, but I think he's tried to make the kind of play that makes him look weak when he's actually pretty strong.
Right. But then from an emotional perspective, you having a lot of money on the line, this was a big shot you were taking.
I think I knew I was going to fold right away, and I took some time just.
You call?
Ace jack is good.
I don't call. Ellie was like, you call? No, bro. No.
But then can you recall whether, adrenaline was at an all-time high in a spot like this, or once you sit down and you're playing, then it sort of settles in?
Yeah, that settles in. No, for
Right.
sure. I mean, obviously, yeah, adrenaline is going. But honestly, part of the adrenaline comes from the not just the money, but the situation, like the camera, the TV. It's fucking Elliot Lesnar, man. I mean, these guys. I mean, look at this. Howard Lederer is right next to me. It's funny.
It's funny too because guys like Ellie and Howard and Phil Locke for many, many years, and Viffer also, they lived on TV as far as poker goes.
Yeah,
so that's all those guys did was play televised cash games. So clearly that helps you in a way playing under the bright lights.
No doubt about it. Oh yeah, having just some experience of being on TV definitely helps. And I do remember, it's funny, because obviously I'm the unknown here, right? And it's at the end of the show, I remember Viffer said something like really nice. I didn't really have much interaction with Viffer, but he said something really nice about me at the end, and he was like, I think Olivier's going to be around for a long time or something, and I was just like, oh, that's like a nice thing to say. And then like 10 years later, I'm like talking about it, which is funny. I don't know if we got off track, but.
No, I mean, this has been very, very interesting, and people in chat are also really enjoying the conversation. If you have questions, by the way, if you're watching this, please let us know in the chat. This is a live show. We take questions. If you have something interesting to say, I'll gladly pass it along. And Groups Poker is already saying that, Olivier, this has been super helpful. I'm the same way with Heads Up Sit and Go winning sessions. He said, you're the first person I've ever heard say that. So, clearly that's a good thing for you to say those things because people can relate to it. There's some questions coming in about the fight and prop betting, so we'll get to those as well.
Sure.
What I'm curious about is how do you adjust to fancy sports cars and gold AP watches to grinding online in New Jersey, which is a huge difference from a lifestyle perspective, from what you can afford yourself to do. How do you
Well, I'm not sure. Well, I think first of all, I think people underestimate how much money you can make living in New Jersey.
Oh.
I'm not going to get into details, but win rates are high in New Jersey.
Okay, good.
Let's just say that. That at the same time, I made a good amount of money playing poker, and I mean, a number of things happened to the money that I made, but one of the things that happened was that I just spent it.
Right.
Some of it. I mean, not all of it, but some of it. It's difficult because, I don't want to get into details about my marriage. I don't think that is an appropriate topic, but I will say that I was influenced in some ways by the woman that I married to, I think, value things a little bit differently than I do now. Like as I've separated myself from that relationship and learned more, just grown and learned and matured and become kind of more me, and a bit less under some influence. my values have changed a little bit. And like, yeah, like I lived a more luxurious life. I don't live a bad life now. I mean, I live a very nice life, but I just don't value things in the same way. And so, yeah, like I wear like much more basic clothing that's more functional and comfortable.
No
And
vests?
what do you say?
No vests anymore?
No, I like I think it was last week or no, for Father's Day, I went to my dad's country club. Also, like I grew up with like living in a reasonable amount of luxury, just to be clear. But I went to my dad's country club for dinner, and like you have to wear like a jacket, like like a shirt and a jacket, and I was like, really? God, I was like annoyed by that, and like I like brought it in the car with me, like I didn't even wear it. I just like brought the stuff in the car. I like changed at the last minute, and then like the club is in Long Island, so it was like an hour away, so I had to drive an hour back. I'm literally after dinner, we're in the parking lot. I'm literally changing like in the backseat of my car. My brother was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Bro, I don't want to drive in my car in this outfit." I was like, "It's just not comfortable." I like brought like sweats to change into just for the car ride home. It's just not. It's like I I don't mind dressing up or whatever, but it's just not me. It just wasn't. I even remember out during the Alpha 8 broadcasts. It was like I was like my hair was like had so much shit in it, and it was like all slicked, like gelled up, and I was wearing the suit, and I just didn't feel comfortable. I mean, it just wasn't me. Um, so yeah, I mean, in some ways I'm like so happy and relieved to have like learned. Have you ever seen that? This is a weird analogy. Have you ever seen that Julia Roberts movie, like The Runaway Bride?
Yeah,
It's like
a long time ago.
okay, so there's a scene in that movie where she keeps running away, right? And then like Richard Gere goes to investigate, and he's like a journalist, and then he like asks her this question. He's like, "How do you like your eggs?" Right? And there's this like moment where she's like, "Oh, I like them this way," but it was like the point was she didn't actually know how she liked her eggs, and she just kind of whatever guy she was with, she liked the eggs the way like that guy liked them. So she like poached with one guy and scrambled with another guy, whatever. And then there's like a moment, then she goes through this whole montage of like, of like understanding and learning about herself. And then like she comes back in later, she's like, whatever she says, like scrambled. I like them scrambled. Like she like learns herself like what she actually likes. And that's like a little bit how I feel like my last like 5 or 7 years have been. I like just figured myself out a little bit more. And I'm just like, so I have this just much more relaxed sense of life and like how I am. And honestly, like I love where I am in New Jersey. I love it. Like I have a dog that is my heart. Like her and I bike all around, and like I play tennis, and like I live right by the water. It's beautiful. It's so peaceful. Like I like can't wait to buy a house and get even more remote and like have like land and just spend all day outside. So like yeah, I've changed a bit, but I've also just kind of learned about myself a little bit more. And so yeah, I don't need to drive a fancy car to be happy. And if anything, it puts pressure. Like it puts pressure on me to win more money because like my lifestyle is expensive. Like I don't want that pressure. Not having pressure, like being able, like having your EV exceed your expenses is a kind of psychological like liberation that like I didn't experience for many years within my poker career. And once I started to have it, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then it was just reinforcing because that feeling was so good. I was like, oh, how else can I cut my expenses? And how else can I increase my EV? But like, you know what I mean? Having that gap be so big is just really relaxing. And for so long, I felt an intense pressure to live up to the lifestyle that I was trying to provide for a family, frankly, but also just that I had basically gotten myself into that I didn't need to be happy, honestly. So yeah. So I mean, I'm very, very happy where I am in New Jersey. And the games are, the games are reasonable, especially during quarantine. The games have been bigger, and there's much more volume. And there's money to be made, but at the same time, another thing I think people don't realize or think about enough is I think people focus on profitability, which is like, kind of obvious. But there's another element to your poker experience, which is which is the distribution, the variance. It's like if your EV is 400 an hour, but you experience it by going up and down thousands of dollars every 10 minutes. It's very different from if your EV is 300 an hour and you just kind of like print $100 every 20 minutes. Like that's a very, very different kind of experience. And so for some people, especially maybe if you're younger or whatever, when I was younger, maybe I would have opted for the higher EV with the wilder variance. As I've gotten older, and also this is all relative, right? Like there are people in the New Jersey context who take what I'm saying to an absolute extreme. I actually, within the context of New Jersey, I really push variance. I challenge people heads up, or I'm willing to play in much tougher games. So, and there are people who have a high win rate, who make money, who don't go down that route at all.
By the way, we just saw Ace King go into the muck. Let's go.
Oh wait, can we rewind that?
Yeah, let's break this down real quick because.
Oh man, how nitty am I?
Sizes and profit and loss. Eli Elezra still up over 110,000 despite losing.
Oh, I'm not even down money yet.
Well, you're down on the whole session. This is the second week. You're down like 120K, and
I am. Okay.
and you have 170 in front of you. 174.
Okay.
Busquet with Ace King.
I'm like, finally, I get a good hand.
Put some frosting on this cake.
Look at my sizing. My sizing is good. I like my sizing. Actually, maybe I would size bigger in this game. Yeah, I probably would size like 9,000 or something. Hello.
2 aces for David Pete, and
Look at
Busquet
that. Look how,
cannot catch
see,
a break.
okay, I actually remember this spot. I remember this very well. This was 100% live tell. I was so confident when he took that money out and did that he was nutted. Like, I remember, I think there was a hand earlier where he did something like that, and he was nutted. I was like, when he grabbed the cash, I was like, oh no. And then he threw it out there, I was like, oh, he's nutted. I mean, I'm not saying a complete live tell. I mean, I don't have 2 kings here. Like, obviously, this is a hand that you can fold. But I think for most people, I would flat here. But I was just like, also, I mean, I'll be honest, like completely honest. I did not, like, I was probably playing a little bit nitty because I had already lost a bunch of money. So, I mean, I will be honest with that. But I remember, like, I don't have the best memory in the world. I mean, for poker hands, I do have pretty good memory. But I remember this. I remember the feeling I had when he grabbed his cash. And I was like, oh, no. I was like, oh, my God, he's nutted. I just knew it. I'm lucky I didn't have 2 kings. I mean, obviously 2 kings. I'm lucky. I think the ace king wasn't suited. If the ace king was suited, I would have called for sure. But I was just like, okay, whatever.
Show a 9 of hearts, and I'll give you.
I should have showed that. I think I didn't want to show that because I was afraid he would show me like 10-4, and I would just be like, okay, obviously my read was wrong, and I'm a nit, and I'm gonna look like so stupid. But even that when I exhale like that, I'm like, man. I'm a little bit concerned for how I'm coming off on the TV. If the dynamic is a bit different, at least for me, if there's just no camera and like I can fold that hand and no one sees it, but I know everyone's going to see that hand. And so I'm just like, oh man, like I hope I don't look fucking stupid.
It's funny too, because, this is like a session of poker after dark, maybe like, 6 hours of filming or whatever it was.
Yeah, like 120 hands or something.
Right. So if you run well within the spectrum of 120 hands or a few bluffs work or a few coolers go your way, both your public perception of who you are as a player as well as the money in the bank
perception
are like just completely skewed in a totally different way, which is just insane when you think about it. Like Tom Dwan's first few sessions on high stakes poker, he was pedal to the metal, his bluffs worked, he got coolers on his side a few times, and all of a sudden you're a legend.
I mean, totally, yeah. And it's like you just comparing. This is why I just love playing online, because it's just like, when you play live poker by itself is just so much variance. Like live tournaments are insane. I mean, it's just so crazy. But then this is just like that on steroids.
Right.
This is like so much higher than I've ever played. It's just like televised, not just, I think it's funny about Poker After Dark, it's not just televised. It's not like it's on TV once. It's on TV and then they replay it and they replay it. Poker After Dark is replayed so often. It's insane. I've had people like not even that long ago think that they had just seen this, like it just happened.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, no, this was like 10 years ago. They were like, oh, I thought that was recent. I'm like, no. Like it was 2 a.m. and you were watching a rerun.
Yeah, but that's also the cool thing about, how poker works so well on TV is that if you've never seen this before, or even if you watched it 5 years ago, it's entertaining again to watch because first of all, you won't remember. And second of all, there's just so much going on. There's so much happening. And with that, I feel like I have to mention this, especially to the audience, and maybe also this is news to you, but High Stakes Poker is coming back. Season 8 is going to be filmed. Once Corona, quarantine, all that stuff is dealt with and we can safely tape again in the PokerGO studio, we are bringing back High Stakes Poker. So with that, I have to ask you, is there still an ambition within you with regards to playing the highest stakes, or is that no longer in sort of the spectrum of what you want to be involved in as far as your career as a poker player goes?
I mean, it probably just depends on the lineup, to be honest with you. Yeah, I'm still incredibly competitive, and I do, like I said, I do challenge like good players in Jersey. And I'm willing to, and I have done a decent amount of studying, and I plan on doing quite a bit more. And so I am like pretty confident in my game. So like, you know, it kind of depends how things go for me. You know what I mean? Like if things continue to go well, and like I have money to take shots with, then like I probably will take some shots. I also really enjoy. Like I really enjoy live poker. I really enjoy this stuff too. Like I said, when I was younger, I was a bit more self-conscious and a bit nervous. But I think especially now that like I've made a lot of progress and that like so much has happened, I think I would really be able to just like enjoy it and soak it in and just really have fun. I mean, again, depending on the lineup, both, you know, when I say lineup, I mean, obviously it not being too tough of a game, but also just it being like a fun experience. Right. I mean, some people are more fun to play with. You know, from an audience point of view, some people are more fun to watch, but from a playing point of view, some people are also just more fun to play with. They're just warmer people, more engaging, more talkative. They give more action. It really does matter a little bit, like who you're playing with in terms of the experience. I mean, maybe that's obvious. But if your question is, do I have the aspiration to try to become one of the best players in the world? No, I don't have that aspiration. Like, you know, this is different. Whether I would play in a televised, you know, one-off televised cash game with some good players, that's a different question. Yes, the answer to that. But do I fancy myself like moving to London and trying to beat 25-50 or 50-100 on PokerStars? Like, no. Like I have no. First of all, I think the chances of me being good enough to do that are not particularly high. I think the guys who are playing those games and the guys who are at the top are very, very good. I have a lot of respect for them. They work very hard. They're very talented. Like, and I don't fancy myself like being that good. That's one. Two, I think my ego has settled down a little bit within that context. That's not something that just really appeals to me that much, especially because I think I know the road. Like, let's say I did have the potential to do it. The road is rocky. Like, you don't just like move up stakes, challenge better people, and then just like smooth sail, crush them all. Like, it is ton of variance and an enormous amount of time and dedication. And honestly, opportunity cost, right? As you spend a lot of time playing and studying, that means you're not spending time doing other things. And I have a ton of interests, and there's just too much that I want to do besides that because honestly, like if you want to get to the very top, like I've always thought that like what people need to do is they need to do a few things. First, they need to try to self-assess objectively. Okay, so you need to kind of try to be honest about what your potential is. How good you can be, not just at poker but anything, right? Like what your kind of inherent limitations are, capacity for development are. That's one. And then two, you need to figure out what your goals are. And I think it's too often taken for granted that your goals are the top, the best, all this shit. It's like, that doesn't have to be your goal, both because it's often unrealistic, but also because once you know the path, you need to try to understand what that really means. And then I think you need to try to match your prioritization with your goals, right? If your goal, which is very obviously reasonable, is to be the best, then you have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to understand what that level of prioritization means for your day-to-day, for your experience, for your relationships, for everything. right? For your lack of balance, like that's just true. But if you're willing to like kind of lower your goals, then you can also lower the prioritization in your life. And so I think that's like, for example, when I was talking about some of the guys that play in New Jersey, there's a couple guys I think who are like pretty good, who don't really take many chances. They don't play that high, or they only play in really kind of soft games. I think part of the reason for that, I assume, is because they just have a different kind of prioritization of poker. They don't take it as seriously. It's not as important to them. It's something that they do to make money, and whatever, for fun. But it's not they have a family and they have other interests and other hobbies. And so, and I think that's actually really smart, right? It's smart to match, like I said, the prioritization you have and your goals. Because if there's a mismatch there, then you're going to have a real problem.
Right. So you mentioned this you touched on it very briefly earlier on, mentioning that, growing up in relative state of luxury and how that was, part of your life growing up. And, I think everything you experience in life is part of, the journey, but it's also part of, what you end up doing and how you get to that point. So I wonder, does coming from that help you in taking more chances on life because you know that, there is this sort of thing you can fall back on as far as family goes? Or
to be clear,
well, also let me finish.
Sure.
Or do you think there's a different side of it where, because your family is doing well, higher expectations are being set from the outset, which puts more pressure on you? So it's sort of two-sided in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely multi-sided and it's complicated. Just to be clear, I don't really want to get it too much into like my family, because I know my family does not want to be out in public. But I didn't grow up like super wealthy. I didn't grow up super like wealthy, but I did grow up privileged for sure. I would say, on one hand, I think there are a number of stories that you hear of people who, like, their relationships with their family in the context of poker was, at first their family was skeptical, and then they made a bunch of money and they were successful, and their family was like, oh wow, that's great, that's amazing. It was not my experience at all. I think my family in part was not particularly happy that I was successful, because they thought my success would reinforce me playing more.
Right.
And at this point now, obviously, like, they accept it and they're fine with it. It is what it is. It's been 15 years. But yeah, I mean, I think there was a set of expectations that I would be doing something quite different, and that set of expectations, I just didn't like it. It just didn't happen that way. In terms of whether I was, like, in the beginning of my poker career, it was a huge advantage because I could just go broke and it didn't matter. But that's not necessarily, I mean, part of it has to do with my family, because I was living at home and I was lucky enough to be, look at Phil just take the money out like that. That's awesome. But I was working at a hedge fund in Connecticut, and I was able to live at home. And so basically I had reasonable income and no expenses. And so I could just like put $3,000 on a full tilt and then lose it, and it didn't matter. It's fine. So that helped me take shots and learn and feel like I had a backstop for sure. But again, I was also, a lot of people's stories, they're 17 or they're 19 or they're in college. Like I was like 23 or 24. I had a proper job that I made like, I don't know, 60,000 a year or something, and I had no expenses because I lived at home. So it was that together, was helped me. As I got later on in life, like, sure, like it's nice to know that, like, I'm never going to be out on the street. Like that is right. that there is a comfort there, and I totally acknowledge that. But at the same time, look, I mean, I've done quite well in poker, and I've never had a losing year. So, I mean, I've always been able to, like, do what I had to do. But at this point now, I think like, my relationship with my family is just so good, and there's just so much more to like who I am than poker, and it's just nobody really cares anymore, as long as I'm like, whatever, happy and healthy and whatever. So I think So yeah, I mean, I think going back, um, I always, I've said this before, but my original relationship with poker was based on this desire to be a trader in finance, and that was always connected to the kind of the small world that I came from. A lot of people either went into finance or consulting or to real estate. There was a few, obviously some lawyers and doctors, but there was a few kind of high end fields that people went into, and so finance was one of them. And in the context of finance, trading always seemed like it would be a good, interesting fit for me. And then poker and trading were supposed to have some similar skills, and I pursued poker as a way to develop skills for trading, and so that's how that happened. But yeah, I mean, I think when I was young, I mean, in my early 20s, poker just took on this, I don't know, this importance in my life, this role in my identity that was so consuming, so all encompassing. And I think part of that was because I had lived a life in which I didn't have to struggle very much in any way. But I don't think that's necessarily that much a function of my family. I think that's in large part a function of just me.
Right.
And I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I was really talented when I was younger. I was just really good at a lot of things. I was very good at school. I was very good at sports. I used to play instruments, and I was good at music. Socially, I was always popular and had friends. I was comfortable with girls. Like things came easy to me when I was younger. And I think poker was one of the first things that was just like, I just couldn't, it was hard. And I think I had a kind of fragility because I hadn't encountered very much, challenge or obstacle, or, I hadn't really been, and also when things did get hard or whatever, in whatever I was doing, I could just kind of drop it and move on to something else. Like I played chess for a little while, but then I stopped playing chess. I played the violin, and then I stopped playing the violin. I would kind of do things, and then if they got hard or I didn't like them anymore, I would just stop doing them.
So let me ask you this: what would Olivier, the person, would have been like if you had stayed in finance and maybe not have come across, a big disruption that poker ultimately became?
This type of counterfactual, I definitely play it through my head sometimes, and I find it so hard to do, obviously, and it's just like a kind of hypothetical game. Sometimes I think to myself, I could have been quite successful in that world, and maybe things would have, things would have gone very differently, and maybe things would be, I don't want to say better, but maybe things would be very good for the 38-year-old, almost 39-year-old, Olivier, who had gone through that path. At the same time, what I am actually quite confident in is that what poker did for me was it didn't create kind of emotional difficulties or like vulnerabilities, but it exposed them. And I think that's something that poker does, I think, for many of us, is that because I think it's so important to be objective. Because just to back up a little bit, the way I see what's one of the things that's so unique about poker, right, is that the input and the output are fundamentally like unconnected, right? Just like we were talking about, like if things go well in this game, like things could be very different for you. And there's, everyone knows that luck is such an important role in determining the outcome in the short term. And so that's what I mean when the input and the output is so disconnected. And what that means is that there leaves a gap there. There's a gap. So you win and you're not sure why. Did I play well? Did I deserve to win? Did I get lucky? It's unclear. And when I lose, the same thing. And I think oftentimes what I think what many people do is they fill that gap with their own prejudices and biases and whatever. And so some people are very, very hard on themselves. So when they do well, they're like, oh, I got lucky. When they do badly, they're like, that's what I deserve, right? That's the kind of personality they have. And there's some people who never take responsibility for anything, right? And they're like, when they do well, they're like, of course I did well, I'm the man. And when they do badly, they're like, oh, I just got unlucky, right? And there's a million other types of personalities. And my point is just when there's a lack of clarity, when there's a gap in that input-output relationship, oftentimes we fill that gap with our own insecurities, our biases, our own kind of emotional shit, our baggage. And so I think part of my poker journey has been trying to resolve those issues, in part to make me better at poker, but then also just in general. And so I think if I hadn't found poker, maybe I would have just grown up the way people grow up. I would have had other experiences. But my point is just I'm forever grateful to have found poker. I'm so thankful to have found poker because it helped expose certain things, and it helped force me confront them and deal with them. And so, yeah, at this point now, it's like I look back and I'm like, if I would go back, would I play poker? Like, I mean, yeah, I think so. Just because I've gotten to a point now where I'm just like I'm so happy with how things are that I maybe I would have been successful in some other ways, but maybe I wouldn't have done the emotional work that I've done, or maybe I wouldn't have learned things that I've learned. So those kind of factuals are hard, but ultimately, I think it's as long as you're comfortable where you are in the present, it can be it's not. I don't feel like I need to go, like I regret anything in the past.
Right. So for the people who are just tuning in or people who are still watching, we are watching Season 7 of Poker After Dark. This is the 150K cash game featuring our guest on the show today, Olivier Busquet. We pay attention to the action every now and then when stuff gets very interesting, but obviously we're focused on the journey that Olivier has been on as a poker professional for now almost 15 years, he just said, which is a very long time to be in this game and still be performing at a high level. If you like what you see, if you enjoy the show, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, do all that good stuff, share with your friends. It really helps us. We have 2 shows every week, 10 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesday morning and 5 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday. And this Thursday, I'm going to have Scott Blumstein on the show to watch 2017 main event final table. So we always have some exciting action coming up. And in the coming weeks, I can already promise you lots of main event winners coming up. Martin Jacobson, Ryan Reese, Greg Merson. So lots of big guests on the show to evaluate their big wins with. And now with Olivier, we're on this different...
Okay, let me ask you something.
Go ahead.
Out of all of your guests, how many guests are reviewing a session or a thing where they got crushed?
I mean, I always say with this show that the action that we watch is the vehicle for the conversation. Sure. And, winning or losing, I honestly don't care because, I would have someone on the show like Mike Mattisau, and, maybe a little controversial in this moment because of all the dumb shit that he said. But I had him on the show to watch the 05 main event where he got heartbroken finishing in 9th place. But we watched all that footage with him and he went through, some emotional development while we were doing this show. So the main event winners are going to run out on me because there's only so few you can talk to. So sure. The emotional development, or at least the underlying storylines that I can get from someone like yourself, or, in the case of Mattisau, his heartbreaking 9th place finish when he was on top of the world in the 05 main event, chip leader with only...
Who won that? Who won the 05 event?
Joe Hashem. By the way, for the people that are tuning into this and are wondering about that, I spoke to Joe Hashem as well, and we relived the final table. That is probably the single most interesting final table to watch if you're watching a main event final table, which is also available on PokerGo, because Hashem is basically a non-factor. That entire final table, he just sits around and sits around and sits around, and then he strikes when everyone else is sort of fallen asleep at the table. And we're picking up aces here, so let's turn it up a little bit.
Howard, you should be saying I'm about to play a hand. And Olivier, you punish him for that.
Every time somebody's out.
100? 30, 40, 150, 12 and a half.
Oh, wait. Okay.
12 times 10 is 12.
Locke tried to find his way into the pot.
Tom Dwan will never fold this hand, guys.
Oh, my God. I can't take it.
Right? I'm not wrong, right? You know your man.
Back on Howard.
$10,000 free roll if I lie.
Oh my God.
Olivier's not the player that you want to make a call like this against.
What?
Especially out of position.
No,
Wow.
I call with these hands.
I think
Got king queen suited. How's he gonna fold?
Straddle. No
Oh,
straddle.
jeez.
Oh, you
And
made,
Howard
you made
knows
another
it.
one of those moves,
Show
huh?
one card, right?
No, no, sorry, no, sorry.
I'll pay you $12.
I was just like, oh man, Nothing is going right. I can't even get accurate with aces.
Oh man.
But I think I get accurate with aces later.
All right, well, we're still in the mix here. We're still watching. But yeah, people, don't forget to like this video and keep your questions coming. I'm going to take a few right now. One of the questions that was asked was about prop betting and in specific relation to the fight you had with JC Alvarado. So let's take this in two ways. Let's take prop betting as a whole, as far as your career goes. That can be anything, playing or doing stuff outside of poker. And then of course, how did that prop bet with JC start? And I've seen the footage. It was a slaughter fest, and I love JC. I've been friends with him for a long time, but that was really hard to watch. So let's start at the beginning with that prop bet. Like, how did that come to be?
Yeah, so that bet was, honestly, it was a bit random. I was going through a divorce, and I think I was at a moment where I was kind of, for me, it was like going from a mentality of us to a mentality of just me. And I think, so I was a bit more open to like what that means, like who I was and how I was, like what direction I was going to go in. So I think I was a bit more open to like some more extreme challenges or ideas. And I was training just like normal personal training with this guy at Equinox in Manhattan. He's this huge Russian dude named Rufat. And Rufat was like, he used to be an MMA fighter. He was like, oh, I could teach you to fight. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool, man. Just like in conversation, like, oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds cool. And the truth is, like, I had always wanted to learn how to fight. Like, I used to love Jean-Claude Van Damme movies when I was a kid. I think a lot of like boys like are attracted to that kind of stuff, like these. And I always thought it would be cool, but I had never taken any martial arts classes or pursued learning how to fight in any like real way. But it had always been a thing that I thought about. And also as I got older, I felt like I kind of lacked some kind of basic skills. I didn't know how to cook. I felt like if I was like, if someone dropped me off in the wilderness somewhere, I would be completely unequipped to deal with it. I didn't have, I didn't know how to change a tire. There was, just some kind of basic things. And maybe part of this had to do with, my upbringing being a bit privileged, but I didn't think I had like, I didn't even know how to do fucking laundry, man. Like I didn't know how to do anything. And so, those are very different types of things, but I think there's a kind of, I don't know, primal kind of basic nature. And I was just like, well, I definitely want to develop some of these things. And so fighting was one of them. And so I always also thought, you can look at me here, right? Like this was how I thought the poker world viewed me, right? Where like I had this long hair, I was quite skinny, I have this French name, I wear these spider cufflinks. And I think there was like, I had always a big part of my identity had always been playing sports and being athletic, but I just didn't think the poker world saw me that way. And so I thought there was an opportunity to basically, I thought the poker world would undervalue or underprice my athletic ability. And I actually said, I just randomly said to Rufat, I was like, you know what? I was like, I bet I could book a bet to fight a poker player. And I bet I could get a good price or a good deal. And he was like, and I said that kind of randomly in conversation. And he was like, do it. He was like, do it. And I was like, all right, relax, Rufat. And then the next time I trained with him, he was like, hey, did you do it? And I was like, no. And I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, do it. Like, honestly, it would be great. Do it. And I was just like, okay, like, let me just see if anybody's interested. And then like, I formed this tweet. I think I was at the gym when I did it. And I formed this tweet and I was just like, hey, looking for some motivation to train MMA. If anyone wants to book like a 6-figure fight bet, like, let me know. But at the time, I hadn't really thought about it. It wasn't a serious thing. I was just kind of throwing it out there. And then I did tweet it at the gym because before I left the gym, like I was still with Rufat, I saw Steve O'Dwyer tweet. And his response was like paging JC Alvarado, who was his good friend. And I didn't know at the time, but JC had a bunch of MMA, like he was a huge fan, super passionate fan. He had some training. He was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, and he had this bet with Andrew Rubble that I wasn't even aware of at the time, that they had made a somewhat similar bet that never ended up turning into a fight because they both got hurt. And then I think Andrew was playing big games in Macau, and it just kind of fell away. So JC was actually, kind of hungry for this experience. He had been close and never had it. And so when he said that, I was just like, when I saw that tweet, I remember I was still at the gym. This was like within 30 minutes of my first tweet. And I was just like, I knew who JC was. I had played with him a few times. He was a known guy in the poker world. And I was just like, huh? I was just like kind of curious, like, really? Huh? Okay, that's interesting. And then I like looked into him a little bit, and he reached out to me like that night. And then we started chatting a little bit. And all of a sudden it became like an actual negotiation. I wasn't sure I was going to do it, but we were just discussing terms. And it's like one thing, you know, to just kind of throw that out there. And like for some random like for some like Dan Bilzerian wrote in an article once, an interview, he said one of his life bucket items was to have an MMA camp and fight. And then after he said that, some Canadian guy was like, I will fight you for $500,000. And then like I Googled that Canadian guy, and he's like a world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And then some like UFC fighter was like, hey, Dana White, let me fight Dan Bilzerian. My point is that like, you know, sometimes, you know, people will come out of the woodwork who are willing to do this kind of thing, and they're just ridiculous as potential opponents because they're just super experienced and whatever. And as I learned more about JC, he's somebody I know personally, right? He's not some random guy. I know him personally. He's smaller than me. I've had like a sense for his physical presence and like wasn't super intimidated. And learning about his experience, he didn't have that much experience. Like I said, he had some training, but he had no competitive experience. He never wrestled when he was young. He had never had any amateur fights or anything. And I was just like, man, I think like we're like getting somewhere here, you know? It's like, oh my God. And I knew nothing about MMA. I literally, Remco, I did not know who Conor McGregor was at the time. I didn't know anything. But one of my good friends named Joe was a little bit like JC. He had done some boxing. He was actually a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. He was a huge UFC fan. He knew a lot of stuff. And he was like one of my best friends. And he just helped me negotiate with JC, ask a bunch of questions, and help me think about it. And he had actually randomly, like Joe had, this was before this fight ever happened, before anything. This was like a couple of years before this. Joe and I were talking about jiu-jitsu, and he was like, oh, let me show you some stuff. And we were like in my office in my apartment, and it was carpeted, and he's a big, strong dude and a purple belt. And he just kind of like put me on the ground, and I didn't like it. And I was just like, yo, fuck you, you know? And we started like wrestling and like not fighting, but like, you know, jiu-jitsu, like wrestling. But I had zero idea what I was doing. He gave me zero instruction. He was just like, let me show you some stuff. And I kind of like was just like, you know, just like really rambunctious. And I ended up with these massive like rug burns, and he was playing with me. But still, I think what he took away from that experience was that like I was a fighter, you know, like I was gonna, like, even though I didn't know what I was doing, I had like exerted all of my energy like forcefully. And he was like, yo, you're a psycho. That's what he said to me. And I was like, yo, you were on top of me. Anyway, so Joe helped me negotiate, and eventually we came to terms that I thought were like pretty favorable for me. So JC let me weigh over 20 pounds more than him. We gave ourselves 6 months to train. And all of a sudden it was like, he actually gave me a little bit of extra money, right? He put up 150,000. I put up 120. And it was like, I was like, all of a sudden, I was like, yo, am I going to do this? I was actually living with my mom at the time because I was going through this divorce, and my ex was living in our apartment, and I was struggling financially, and I didn't want to spend money on a place, and my mother let me live with her. And I was like, obviously, this is a huge amount of money to bet. And I was like, man, does this make sense? And I was like, I don't know. And so like I literally had meetings. I had a meeting with my brother. My brother took me out to dinner. I had a dinner with my dad, and I was living with my mom. And all three of them, and anyone else I spoke to, like any of my friends, they were all like, this is literally the worst idea you've ever had. Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I remember my brother was like, you're going to be known as like the dude that beat up some Mexico in Mexico City. And I was like, what? It's like, we haven't even agreed to where the fight would be. And I was like, what does that even mean? He's like, why do you want to hurt someone? I was like, I don't want to hurt someone. I just like, fighting is a sport, and it's interesting and cool and challenging. Like, what are you talking about? And I remember having this conversation with all my family and then a couple of my friends. And I remember thinking to myself, like, as close as these people are to me, they don't really get me. They don't really understand like me and this moment that I'm in right now, and like how difficult this divorce is for me, and how I need something. And no one really understood. And I remember having those conversations where everyone was like, this is a terrible idea. And that actually reinforcing to me that I wanted to do it, and being like, I want to do this. Like, this is good. And then the last thing for me in deciding to do it was I just remember feeling really afraid. As it got closer and closer, I remember feeling scared of it and being like, and I remember my family telling me not to do it. I remember thinking this could be my way out. I'll just like message JC and just be like, hey man, as much as I want to do this, it would break my mother's heart and my parents really don't want me to do it. And so I'm sorry to like have wasted your time, but like, I'm just not gonna do it. I remember thinking that and being like, yes, do that. Like, that's your way out. You can save face and you can like do it. And I remember just being like, I'm not gonna be that guy. Like, I don't know which guy I'm gonna be, but I'm not gonna be that guy. Like, the fact that I feel this fear means I have to do this, means like I wanna do this. And I was like, I just agreed to it. I was just like, all right, let's do it. And then I was like, Joe, I said yes. He was like, wow, okay. And the thing was, at the time, like, I thought I was gonna train with Rufat. So for like a week, I'm like going to Equinox. It's like on the Upper East Side, and the Upper East Side of Manhattan is like a lot of older women on treadmills, and we're in the middle of this crowded Equinox, and he's like holding pads, and I'm like trying to fight, and he's like, all right, let's do some grappling. And like, we did 5 minutes of grappling, but it's on the floor of Equinox. The Equinox floor is not made for that, and my knees are just completely torn up. Like, I have these massive cuts on burns on my knees. And I remember being like, getting really nervous, being like, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, I don't think this is the right way to train. And I was talking to Joe, and Joe's like, yo, I know this guy. His name is Tito. I used to train jiu-jitsu with him. Now he's got a gym, an MMA gym that he runs in the Bronx. Just go meet with him. And the guy that I mentioned before, that was my manager, he was still my boy. Been my boy for 20 years, now 30 or whatever. And he had a connection to Chris Weidman's gym in Long Island. And he was like, yo, I think I could get you to train at that gym. And I was like, I have to go up to Long Island, and it's like a pro MMA gym with all these pro fighters. I was so nervous. I was like, I don't fucking want to do that. That scares the shit out of me. And so Joe was like, go meet with Tito. So I went up with Joe. He took me into the gym, and it's like a small gym. It's like 2 rooms. And I was just like, what's up? And there was like 4 kids there. I mean, I call them kids. They're like, 2 of them were identical twins. Well, actually, they're not identical, but they look identical. It's really weird. But they're 19. They were 19 at the time. And like a 20-year-old and like the old guy was like 22 or whatever. Lewis is like 22. And they were the fight team. And he was just like, all right, like, let's see what you got. And I was like, what? And so they had me grapple with these kids who were like purple belts and now brown belts.
But you're just like a fit guy, right? You're not like out of shape. You're fit.
Sorry. So at that time, like, I had spent so from this picture of me now, I had probably gained 20 pounds from this picture. I was like 108. I remember because I was 187 pounds. And I said to JC, because I knew nothing about the sport, I said, I don't want to lose any weight for this bet. So I want to book the weight at the same weight that I am, which was the stupidest thing in the world, because MMA is an endurance sport. And like, my body was dying to shed weight.
Right.
It really wanted to shed weight. Like, my natural, even now I'm 10 pounds lighter because now I fast a lot and I eat super clean and I'm just like focused on being lean. But yeah, I mean, I probably should have fought at like 170 or 175 at most, and I was 187, and that's without cutting. But anyway, so yeah, so I had spent like not just with Rufat, but I had a personal trainer before that that I trained with, literally set like 8 times a week. There was a bunch of weeks where I went twice in a day. We would do like chest in the morning and then legs in the afternoon, and I spent thousands of dollars on this trainer. And I got pretty jacked, but I was, like whatever, like bodybuilding jacked. I didn't have like real functional strength. I could bench weight. I could squat some, but not that much. But I could bench some. I could curl some. I was really good with the lat, with the pull downs, whatever, weightlifting strength. And so I looked pretty jacked. And I'm 6'1", and I've always been very athletic. I was very fast. I was good at basketball and tennis, and I was athletic. Anyway, So he's just like, all right, let's see what you got. And so I'm just like grappling with these kids, and they're lighter than me, they're smaller than me, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And after it was over, and I was like really nervous, but whatever, I just did it. And then after it was over, and they were like, all right, we think we can, he was like, I think I can work with you, basically. And he told me later he was just trying to see if I would quit, like how my body moved, like some body awareness, like some basic athletic stuff, and whether I had fight in me. And I mean, I just went until I was completely dead and couldn't go. I mean, these kids are also like, I think sometimes you can go into MMA gyms, and some guys are dicks, and like they'll like, whether they hurt you or whatever, these guys were really just, they're the sweetest, like nicest guys, and they were just like so good with me. And I think they appreciated that. I mean, I was very humble and very respectful, and I just worked real hard. I just tried as hard as I could. And also, like, I mean, obviously I'm super scared of this bet, super scared of this fight. It's a lot of money, especially for me at the time. And I was just like, and it's a whole public spectacle. Everyone's going to watch it. It became such big news in poker. And I was just super scared. And so I translated my fear into just trying to work as hard as I can. And I would watch hours and hours of MMA and jiu-jitsu videos. And, I trained like 5 or 6 days a week at the gym, and then 6 days a week strength and conditioning. So Rufat actually is an excellent strength and conditioning coach. He's like there's like some Russian multi-time weightlifting gold medalist, and he's on that guy's Wikipedia page. He actually is very, very good at getting people strong. And because he was an MMA fighter, he was very good at creating workouts specific to MMA. So I was really lucky actually to have Rufat, and then to have this gym, and together it was just really, really good preparation. And so I trained for 6 months, and I was ready, I think, when the fight happened.
So how rewarding is that process, and then the outcome versus other things you've achieved in your life?
Yeah, it's definitely the best experience of its kind that I've had. Like, I mean, not comparing it to, like, let's say falling in love, and to, like the kind of like interpersonal like stuff like that. Like, let's put those aside from a personal achievement development point of view. I think it trumps anything that's happened to me in poker. Also, it's easier because it's like a kind of singular event. Whereas, like, let's say, like, Heads Up City goes, like, I played thousands of them every day or whatever, so it's very different. But it came at the right time. It, I think, instilled some really good habits and discipline that I took with me. I was very fortunate to be able to kind of negotiate really good terms. Right. Part of it, I think, had to do with the fact that since I was so afraid, I was hesitant to say yes. And so that enabled me to get slightly better terms. He really, having been so close to that experience before and really wanting to have it, I think he was willing to give up slightly worse terms than otherwise. So that was really good for me. And then, like I said, I think the poker world in general just underpriced my athletic ability, which I was able to take advantage of. And then I was super lucky to have both Rufat and Tito on the helping me prepare. I think all those things made it so that I was really confident and really well prepared. And obviously, like, financially, it was good. It was good for my confidence. It was just good in a lot of ways. And I've like taken a lot of what I kind of learned from that experience and tried to translate it into other parts of my life.
Wow. I mean, it's an awesome, awesome story. And I think anyone who's watching this and has gone through some kind of personal development, whether that's fitness or, some mental stuff, I think everyone can relate to this on their own scale. And thanks to everyone watching still. We really appreciate it. You're still alive here with Olivier Busquet, watching Season 7 of Poker After Dark. This is the 150K cash game. We're picking out some hands whenever we see something pop up that Olivier is involved in. But aside from that, we take questions from you guys. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll make sure to get your questions asked here on the chat. One of the questions, Olivier, that came up here was about your relationship with someone called him your pupil, Dan Coleman, and playing heads up against him in the Barcelona event. Was he truly your pupil? How did that relationship develop? And how do you look back on, I don't know. Dan is interesting. I had Dan on a podcast a long time ago. And I told him as well that, when he won one drop, I was very disappointed because of the way, he handled himself. And I had no business judging him because I had no idea, what his situation was and what he's gone through. So for me, that was also a good lesson in, how you perceive someone and how you judge someone based on the limited knowledge you have of how they feel and think.
Sure.
But how has your relationship with him been over the years? And then especially to pinpoint, that moment in time where you and him are playing heads up in Barcelona for basically $1 million, which is pretty insane.
Yeah, I mean, just to respond to the one drop thing, I think the one drop thing was so complicated because on one hand, it's like this incredible thing, right? It's an amazing thing. And like, I think most people just associate it with like celebration and being happy and being joyful. But I think there's a kind of personality that responds to it actually with like, it's a kind of humbling experience, especially since it's a live poker tournament in which you know that you don't deserve it, and like especially someone like Dan who is like really, really aware of like luck and variance and how it works. I think there was a part of him that was, I wouldn't want to say embarrassed, but just like fully aware that this was like he just like didn't like really deserve this in this way. That plus, it really irritates me the way the poker world, I think, is deceptive about certain things. And it's like Dan had a percentage of himself, right? A percentage of himself. But like, and I don't need to get into the specifics, but like, let's say it wasn't that much.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like you're on TV and it's like, you just won $15 million. It's like, no, you didn't. Like, no, you did not. And it's like, maybe you won 3 or 4 or whatever, but you didn't win $15 million. And it's like, he's like, it's like you feel uncomfortable having to like kind of be a part of this lie or this deception or this like marketing thing. And I think for some people, it's really uncomfortable. And then at the same time, he was very young and just generally a bit self-conscious. And so, I mean, this is a huge moment with everybody looking at you. It transcends the poker world into the broader world. And it's like, it's just a lot. I think it's just a lot. So like, I sympathize with Dan. Obviously he's my boy. So like, I sympathize with Dan, but just to respond to the one drop thing specifically. Right. But anyway, so I met Dan when he was like 17 years old. I was playing heads up, sit and goes on full tilt. And on full tilt, part of the idea of full tilt was like learn, play or whatever, and chat with the pros. The chat was like a big part. And this was, back when I still had chat. And like, there was like, PokerStars had this rule where to chat in a game, you needed to have the buy-in of the game in your account. But Full Tilt didn't have that rule, so it would let anybody chat in the game. So like, if you watch high stakes cash games, the chat was a complete ridiculous circus mess. All these people saying all this ridiculous stuff. But in heads up sit and goes, which obviously like very niche or whatever, I had like it was weird, but I had like kind of a loyal following. I had people who would like watch my games like on a somewhat regular basis. One of like my most loyal, this is a weird story. One of my most loyal like railbirds was the term. I ended up one random day, I was going to a Knicks game and I forget why, but we had an extra ticket where like somebody just like either dropped out or we bought one extra ticket. And it was like, I was with Dan. Actually funny, I was with Dan and our friend Alex, who a lot of people don't know, but he's like one of the best poker players I know. He doesn't really play anymore. But his name was H2 Olga on Full Tilt, Lada Lenya. He was a heads up Ingo star, hyper heads up Ingo like alpha reg. But anyway, we had an extra Knicks ticket. I forgot why. And I asked this railbird if he wanted to come, because I knew he lived in New York, and he came with us to the Knicks game, and it was like we had such a good time, and I think he really, really had a great time. He was a big fan of Dan and Alex too, and he was just looking around like, he at one point he goes to me, we were at the Knicks game, and he goes, do you think the rest of the people like in Madison Square Garden like realize that like Liv B 112 is here? And I was like, bro, nobody gives a shit. Like I was both flattered, but also just like it was so funny. He was like adorable. I mean, not a young guy. He was like, but just like a bit kind of naive, and just like it was like so funny. But anyway, so like the rail was like a part of the experience on Full Tilt. It was like a real part of the experience. And so Dan came into my rail, and he was really funny, but he would say things every once in a while that he would be like, oh, that was a terrible call. Obviously, he wasn't bluffing, or like well, if he would say something, I would be like, yo, you're like, I would check back. He'd be like, you have to bet that hand for value. He would say some, like, he would be like trolling me in a poker strategic way. And I was like, who the fuck is this guy? And I would like, he was like, yo, shark scope me or something. And I shark scoped him. And he was like a winning player at like, I don't know, $30. You know, he had like, you know, whatever. And so I ended up getting his, I think it was AOL, and we ended up messaging. I didn't know at the time he was 17, but then I learned he was 17. And we just became friends. We were just like chatting a little bit here and there, and then we became closer friends. And I was like, I started to like, yeah, I mentored him a little bit. I gave him some money to play with. I staked him. And then he was like a dishwasher, and he quit his job like washing dishes and then ended up playing under a stake. And then, you know, our relationship was a bit rocky, in part because I was a psychopath, like unbalanced and unhappy, and it was hard for him. And then he was the psychopath. I mean, he was like, when he was 18 years old, he was a crazy dude. And so, you know, there was a time where we like butted heads and we weren't really friends that much. And then he started playing higher stakes, and there was a time where we started playing each other. He ended up getting involved with, I forget the guy's name, but somebody who was like known for multi-accounting. And he became a good friends with him. And then on Stars, I think he did some multi-accounting, and then he got banned. And then after he got banned, this kid, all he wanted to do was play. I mean, he was like me. All he wanted to do was play all day long. He would just grind and grind and grind. And so he ended up getting access to a different account and played on a different account. And he ended up playing me in 5Ks. And I didn't know it was him. And he crushed me, and he was trolling me in the chat, and his screen name was a troll. Like, he was just the biggest troll ever, but he was good. And I was tilting, and he like knew how to tilt me, and he knew how I played, and he just crushed me. And I remember, I mean, it wasn't that, it was probably like 40K or something, but like, you know, it's a lot of money, but in 5Ks it's actually not that much. But anyway, and then I get like an email from PokerStars like a week later, and it was like, oh, this was a multi-accounter or whatever, and they returned like 90% of my money back, and I was like, oh my God. It was like they just gave me 35K. I was like, oh my God. Because for, you know, a big part for me is like I just constantly adjust. So it's like I just adjust to the new level. I'm like, okay, now, you know, it's like I win 10K in a session. I'm like, boom. If like I lose 2K and I'm up 8K on the day, I'm like pissed off because like I really just lost 2K. So it's like I had adjusted, and I was like, I just got a gift of like 35 posters, maybe $35 or something like that. I forgot the money, but it was something like that. And I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. And I don't think it sounds weird that they would tell me it was him, but for some reason, I just either knew it was him or something happened, and I was just like, oh my God. And I wasn't even really mad at him. I was just like, you know, I knew that I had done some stuff that was not particularly nice, and like our relationship was rocky, and we just like moved past it and just became friends again. And then after we became friends, we kind of agreed not to play each other. And then our friendship just became very, very close, and became kind of like big brother, little brother. And I think, so like, yes, there was a kind of mentor-mentee. Oh my God, look how skinny I am.
Let's listen to what you have to say.
Maybe a little annoyed with Phil and his antics at the table.
No, not at all. I mean, he's having a good time, and he's gambling it up, and I think he's adding a good dynamic to the table. I'm just not running particularly well. I don't know if I'm playing really that well either, and I just run into some tough spots, and it's more my own play that's been frustrating a little bit.
Sure. What's your frame of mind at the table right now?
I mean, I'm just trying to kind of make good decisions and stay focused, and try not to let, you know, whoever's antics kind of distract me. But besides that, you know, I'm just it's just tough to kind of show up with the second best hand a lot, and then when I do get hands, everyone's just like instantly folding their hands.
You're like, really? Can I make some money here?
Yeah, so it's been tough.
How do you take advantage of Phil?
Well, he's playing differently than I've ever seen him or than I expected. So, you know, right now I would probably try to hit some hands and let him kind of overplay some of his hands. But in general, I think he tends to play a little bit more conservatively, and I think I would try to just, if I can get into good spots when I'm in position, just kind of do what Viffer's doing, just put him into some tough decisions, make big bets on the river, and make him make some hero calls, which I don't think he really wants to do.
All right. Well, thank you for talking to us. I hope you run a little bit.
I mean, you seem dejected already. Like you seem totally over it.
It's funny because that wasn't my takeaway. I mean, obviously, it's like I'm focusing on different things. I it's funny because the way I look at it, I'm like, oh, I'm so adorable. That's like my feeling about it. I'm like, oh, that's cute. Like I'm like, I look at myself as if I'm like some young. I mean, I am young, but like it's funny. I have some like affection for my younger self because I realize how little I like knew and just like how like fragile I was. I think. So yeah, I have that kind of compassion towards my younger self.
But
Anyway,
you seemed a little bit sort of. You almost seemed aware of how special this opportunity was and how this moment in time was a short span of time, and then having the second best hand a lot, and things not working out, and sort of you can almost see it click in your head of like, yeah, this is like that opportunity that is not going so well right now.
yeah, and also like inside, I mean, I'm smiling. I was devastated.
Right.
I was devastated to be getting crushed. And like I said, when I was like, oh, like I'm not even sure I'm playing well, I was just like, I was just like hanging on by a thread, like from a confidence point of view. So yeah, maybe that comes off in the interview. But like, yeah, that's definitely how I felt at the time. I think
Right.
I was just like, I was super gutted.
Right.
That it was going like this.
But back to the
Back to Dan. So
yeah.
like, so then after Dan and I basically stopped playing one another and became like really, really close. After that, we really actually didn't talk poker very much. And so like, yeah, so in the beginning, I for sure helped him a little bit. But after that, he got like, he went from like being, like talented and pretty good to like elite, like not for me, like on his own or through other people. I mean, I think he was friends with Bryn and he was friends with Luke Schwartz, and he became friends with Isildur. I mean, he was friends with some other people, and he was just very talented. I mean, he just was really good. So yeah, I mean, there was a kind of mentor mentee relationship on some level, but from him to get from good to elite was not my doing at all. And yeah, at that time it was funny. We would hang out and chat and whatever, and we would rarely talk poker at all.
Wow.
He became very close with my ex, and we were just like, it was like kind of a family. We were just hanging out, but poker was, not a thing.
So then for someone who is like almost in a big brother, little brother situation, describe those two moments, him winning one drop and you winning and beating him heads up in Barcelona.
Yeah, him winning one drop, it was funny because those two moments are not that far apart in time. They're the same year. Him winning one drop was like, I mean, it was kind of surreal, because he was having such a good year, or the previous year. He was just crushing hypers, and he was the alpha reg. I mean, he was the guy. It was clear, and he was playing 5Ks, and he was just gotten so good. And I always thought he was good live. I always told him he should play more live. I was like, and he had in the beginning of his live tournament career, he had some bad luck, and I think it had kind of soured him a little bit. And he's just like, he doesn't have the same. He just lacks some patience a little bit. And I think this is part of why he was really focused on super high rollers, because it's like just really exciting, interesting stuff all the time. And like day one of a smaller tournament, he just sometimes has trouble focusing. Right. So I thought for some reason I saw my hand was King Jack suited. And I thought it was the King Jack suited versus the Vickers 5 hand. But anyway, so yeah, so like I was, and then at the final table, like it was awesome. It was just it was really great to see him just like excelling and thriving and getting recognized, because I always thought he was so talented and so good. And all of a sudden it was like, everyone thinks this guy's the best. And he was already having such a great year. It wasn't like out of nowhere. Like if you were paying attention to the poker world, he was crushing. And then in Barcelona, honestly, like, the Barcelona thing was, like I said, it was a special moment for me, because I mean, I was just like, I needed it financially. I was just, I thought I was going to become a dad, and like him and I, this was like the only trip my ex didn't come with me on. So I was rooming with Dan, and we had the whole T-shirt thing where we were wearing this Gaza and Palestine T-shirts, and that like kind of influenced the whole dynamic. And I was doing it mostly as a way to just be supportive of Dan, and like in general, it was amazing. I mean, I remember, I think it was like, I was staying at the Hotel Arts, and I don't think I had booked it like enough nights. And so it was closed. And I remember I had to switch hotels, and my credit card didn't work. Like I had a couple credit cards, but my main credit card like didn't work, and it was like had been shut off. And I was like, what the fuck? It was like the first time I had an experience like that. And I was just like, whoa. And I had another credit card, and it was not a big deal, but I just remember being, man, I need this money. Like, this is good. I'm really glad I did this. Like, this was important for me. And, obviously that's like very lucky. But yeah, so to actually play him heads up at the end was like, in one way it was nice. Like, it was great. Obviously we got to the end and he's my boy. In another way, I think I felt a little bit like, I felt like a little bit selfish in that I kind of wanted this moment for me. Like, Dan had so much success. He had won one drop, he had done all this stuff. And it was like, this was just another fucking day for Dan.
Right.
For me, this was huge. It's like, this is so important for me. I really needed this. This was huge. And it was just like, oh, Dan makes another final table. Like, oh, is Dan going to win this tournament again for like the 13th fucking tournament he's won this year? And it was just like, I was like, can I just have this, can I just have this moment a little bit? And I wasn't bitter towards him. I wasn't upset. I was so happy to be there with him. But I just remember there was a part of me that was like, I would like to just have this just for me and not, Dan has had already so much success. I think I was a little bit jealous of his success. But at the same time, I was very happy for him. But if I'm going to be completely honest, I think there was a little bit of jealousy there. At least in that particular moment. Like when he won Florida later, like I wasn't even at Florida, and I was like, he had won all this stuff and all this thing, and I was just like watching and texting with him, and I was so happy for him. So this wasn't like a lasting emotion, but I just remember in that particular moment, I was like I would like to just have this for me a little bit.
Just to put it into some context for the people that are watching that don't fully remember how.
Oh, this is the hand, by the way.
Oh, this is the hand?
Yeah, this is the hand. This is a great hand.
A bigger hill.
Make it 7, says Busquet.
When you raise
the guy. The king jack suited. Let's go. And my 3-bet is so small. I mean, I 3-bet set. I mean, it's way too small.
Olivier out.
I was kind of nervous on this flop because there's like so much speed to me. Like 9-10, obviously 7s and 8s, ace jack. And I was just like, all right, like, obviously I'm betting, like, hopefully I don't get raised. Like, let's just see what happens. And I bet, I bet pretty big, which I think is fine actually now. And I get snapped off, and I'm still a little bit nervous because like a lot of bad cards. 9 is a bad card, 10 is a bad card, and I'm like, oh, that's a good card. But at the same time, I'm like, if I was beat, I'm still beat. And I was like, it's hard. I've been getting no action at all from any of my good hands, and I keep thinking everyone is folding monster hands to me. So I'm like, shit, if I bet and get called, he might have a better hand than me. And he just has 2 5s, and he's just like, I don't believe you. What the fuck?
The 2011 version of poker is the "I don't believe you" is one of my favorite. One of my favorite.
He just, I thought, I was like, oh my god, am I beat here? I was like, oh, man. I was like, I was confident, but I was just unsure. I was like, I really just don't want to get raised. And then I was like, oh. I was like, thank God that card comes. I was like, it's not a heart, it's not a 9, it's not a 10. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I was like, yeah, a king would have been nice, but like a 5 is almost as good. I was like, all right. I was like, I cannot check. Obviously, my hand is really good. I was like, I really hope I don't get raised. I was like, all right, let's just fucking bomb it. I think I bet 50K. I think I bet 2 of those. Yeah. I just bet those 2 big bets. And he fucking hits a 5 and gives me the speech. This was amazing.
Another cooler.
Oh, it's not me.
Now I'm like, I'm beat. I know I'm beat now. I'm like, oh my god, another cooler.
7s or 2 8s. You're getting called, like I think, but you're not getting raised.
Look at me. Look at my face. I know I'm beat. I'm like, fuck.
You're dying on the inside.
I know I'm beat when he says that. He goes, you're getting called, you're not getting raised. I think he has 9-10.
I can't raise you. I can't fold. I have a full house. I call.
Oh, my face. I'm just like, oh no.
Oh my God, in the river! Suck out our teeth. 2
Wow, that was like the moaniest 2-outer suck out. Like,
Oh
he said, what a cooler. This is brutal. He
It's
probably
not,
has a full.
what are you doing, Viv? Viv, are you that tuned in? You just know to call and then get there?
No.
And then get there and then.
I just know when he bets on the river, he has a big hand, and it's like,
Oh my.
I gotta quit. Maury, can you put me in the kiddie game? I don't know what to do all year. This guy's calling. And
I mean, the conversation could have gone, I can't raise you. I can't believe that now that I know that you actually have something, that I actually caught my 2-outer.
Right,
And just
and
call.
I got real lucky.
Put him out of his misery instead of the, oh, this is brutal.
I'll do 12.
What a cooler.
Another cooler.
It was. I actually did appreciate a little bit that the other guys were like, kind of giving him a little shit. I appreciated that a little
I mean,
bit. It was,
Mueller is completely like sinking away under the table out of sort of cringe for what Vifford just said. Howard is coming to your defense. Phil Locke says he wants to leave the table. Like they're all just like putting Vifford on blast, but still, you lost a massive pot.
yeah, no, I lost a huge pot, but yeah, it's funny because that kind of thing, I think, at least to me, does make a little bit of a difference. And it's like, I think these guys felt for me a little bit. I mean, I think they felt like I was playing fine or whatever, and that I was getting crushed. And I think they could feel my energy a little bit, like I was down. And it's like on TV too. So it's like, there's a lot of stuff going on. And there's, I mean, these guys are decent guys, I think. So like, especially Greg. I really like Greg. But anyway, not that I know him that well, but, and Phil. I mean, anyway, it was funny. Now that I look back on it, it's funny. At the time, I was just devastated. But I was also just like, obviously, this is just the worst possible thing. Like every single thing is just going badly. I do, by the way, like later on, I do make a little bit of a comeback.
Right.
I get quite lucky, actually.
Let me tie in one of the questions from the chat that I think is interesting, along with the fact that I just wanted to quickly describe for the people watching at home how insane Dan Coleman's 2014 was.
Oh, shit.
It was April. He wins Super High Roller 100K in Monte Carlo. He wins
Which is a huge one.
Huge.
The Monte Carlo 100K, huge.
$2 million first prize. Then he wins one drop for $15 million. He finishes second to you in Barcelona. 10 days later, he wins the Seminole 5K for $1.4 million. A month later, he wins Alpha 8 London. And then he final tables just 2 weeks later, another big super high roller in Macau for about $400K. And then the next year finishes third in the 100K one drop for $1.5 million. And then he goes on to have like 10 more.
Oh, by the way, when you say he finished third in that one drop,
yeah,
he didn't play any poker between the Macau and the one drop.
Holy shit.
Yeah, he just did. He took all that time off, came back for one drop, and then got third or whatever. It was like, what the fuck?
Just insane. Like, and he followed that up as well with a Seminole third place finish in the same main event that he won the year prior.
Right.
Just completely ludicrous. But to come back to the question from Brett in the chat on YouTube, he's asking, can you pull back the curtain on Poker After Dark and tell us the viewer more about what it's like aside from what we see? So we see this, the hands, the action. What is it like to play on Poker After Dark, and what is it like behind the scenes?
I mean, honestly, it was a long time ago, but it's like there's not that much. Honestly, it's like you show up and like, did they put makeup on? I think they do makeup. I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure. I think they did maybe. But there's just like they have the set. They give you you give them the money. They give you chips. And like you play. When you don't play, like during the breaks, there's like a little break room. They have like, I don't know, like sandwiches. I mean, it's nothing so crazy. I mean, there's what you see is kind of what you get.
Right.
Like there's nothing. Yeah, it's not like there's this like back situation. There's not like some backstory or some underground situation. Like it's basically what you see. And when you're not like after, like when it's over, you just leave. You know what I mean? It's not like everyone gets. I mean, at least for me, I was just like, okay, can I go now? Like, let's go. Like, right. I just wanted to leave. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it wasn't. There's not so much going on.
I think it's cool for you to emphasize and clarify that, because I've been on the set of many poker TV shows, and that is the cool thing about poker on TV, because it is very real. It's just people show up to a game, they turn on the lights, they turn on the microphones, and people just start playing. So that is the cool thing about poker, is that it's such a real thing, and it's real emotions, and it's real money, and it's real pain that people are going through as they're going through these massive swings. And for the people watching, when all these shows resume, when quarantine is over and things are safe again, stop by at the PokerGo studio. Come watch for yourself when Poker After Dark is being filmed. You can always walk in and, check out the studio, because it's an awesome space, and it's really cool to see everyone who's playing up close, especially when, some of these bigger lineups are being brought in, and, when Rob Young's in town and there's like millions of dollars on the table, and there's nothing more fun than seeing that environment and both the tension and the lack of tension. There's the tension in the air about the stakes in the game, but there's also this sort of relaxed environment, because these guys, have all been through it before. So they act a little bit different than, you and I, the viewer, would play in a big game for our stakes. As we're watching this right now, for the people who are just tuning in, this is Run It Back twice a week, Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific, and Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, do all that good stuff. I'm now joined by Olivier Busquet. We're going closing towards the end of the show. We got about 12 minutes left, and we got the Viffer shout out coming at the end as well. That's part of the footage, so we're gonna hear what he had to say about your poker game, which is something you referred to earlier in the show. Olivier, let's talk, present and future a little bit. You've been grinding online in New Jersey. You seem to have it figured out, if I can use a blanket statement like that.
More or less, it feels that way a little bit.
Right. So what does the future of Olivier Busquet look like post quarantine, which obviously has been good for you?
Yeah. So I'm definitely going to play some live tournaments like I always have. I think poker will still be a reasonably significant part of my life for at least the next couple of years. And I've mentioned this. I mentioned this on my podcast, but I have a real interest in pursuing further education in psychology and becoming a therapist. I've really enjoyed any and all of the kind of mentor or coaching relationships that I've had in the context of poker. I've taken on some students. I'm actually going to start doing just mental coaching for an entire stable of players, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I just think I would really enjoy learning a bit more about psychology, and then being able to use that in a more kind of formal way to just help people kind of resolve their own issues. And so I anticipate poker. The thing is, it also kind of depends how online poker changes or progresses. There's some kind of threats to online poker, in the form of, bots or aids, or, the way people can essentially try to cheat. And hopefully the poker sites will improve at dealing with them. And then there's obviously some unanswered questions about regulation in the US, and whether more states will pass and form a larger player pool. Obviously, if that happens, that's fantastic. I would be really excited about that. So, that depends. My personal life depends a little bit too. I would really like to become a father. I don't have any direct plans as of right now, but that is a real goal of mine. And so I would like to get married again and have a family. And if that happens, obviously that will change the amount of time I have and what my priorities are. So for the short term, I think I will kind of continue doing what I'm doing now. You mentioned my podcast. I haven't done as much with my podcast since quarantine, because poker has been such a focus, but I do intend on doing more of the podcast. And I really enjoy that project. I have a couple of other ideas for projects that I want to do. So I mean, I have a ton of interests. I've gotten into cooking. I'm into a lot of fitness and sports things, and there's a lot. I'm doing a lot of stuff, and I'm kind of like you alluded to, I think I'm in a good place right now, and so I kind of want to keep doing what I'm doing for a little while. But yeah, I do foresee taking this psychology path, maybe not right away, but in a couple of years. And then, yeah, depending on how things shake out, I think poker will always be a part of my life, but it might be kind of more or less a part of my life depending on some other factors.
Right. Well, I mean, it's good to still have you in the industry, and for someone who has changed their outlook on the game and on life, it's very interesting hearing this. And I'm saying that because in the chat we've had a lot of people saying like, oh, I didn't like the old Olivier, but now he seems like a really cool dude, and now he's someone that I really love listening to. So that's a lot of props for people who are watching this from the sidelines, who only get one side usually, the side of what they see on social media or what it is they see on TV. So having a podcast, you have one yourself for the people that are watching. Two Lives with Olivier Busquet is the name of the podcast, and if you want to listen to that, you can find it on your favorite podcasting devices. While you're dying again on the inside here, so it seems, as you're watching this, or it's probably just a Phil Lock moment. But anyway,
I don't know. Phil just came over and he like hugged me and said something. I don't know what he said, but it seemed like he was being sweet.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. And look, you don't think that matters?
In front of me, it's already going to come to like 20.
No, I didn't see it. He might have seen it.
At 8 high. At 8 high. No. Whatever. 8
it's going to come to me 25.
When you invite Phil Lock and Eli Lesra to a poker game, you're just guaranteed a certain kind of atmosphere that really helps carry on the banter, even when people are stuck or when things aren't going that well. So that's I love that about watching this kind of stuff, is that there's always something happening. It's not just the poker action. There's a lot more to it.
Look at Ellie coming after my straddle with the Queen 5.
So awesome.
No respect. He's right there.
Felt how sick it is, and just known the aliveness you feel at the moment. Just do it,
I think we were laughing at Phil Lock because he's just like going off, and we're just looking at like, wow, this guy's
he's just totally out of control. Yeah, that's so funny. Well, let me ask you this one thing though. When live poker returns, like how do you think that'll go? Do you think that the big live events in North America are going to just at some point resume as if nothing happened, or do you think we're in for like a lasting change on that front?
Yeah, I mean that's a hard question. I don't feel super qualified to have a strong opinion. I think obviously there's a massively important dependent factor, which is a vaccine. If a vaccine comes out and it's effective, I think it's much more likely that things will go back to some version of what we would consider normal. Short of that, very hard for me to predict. I mean, I really just don't know. Live poker is obviously like not a good situation for infectious diseases. So, I mean, I have no plans on playing live poker for the calendar year. I'd be surprised if I played live poker before 2021. I think honestly, in the U.S., without getting into a major political debate, I think it matters what happens in November.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, COVID is hard to predict, and I'm pretty careful, and I'm a bit fortunate because a lot of my routine and my life is like in my apartment, or I don't do a ton of like partying or mass gatherings. But besides poker, I mean, obviously, and I'm very fortunate, right? It seems to me that like the poker world has kind of been split in two. That people who play online poker all the time are like doing great. Online poker is thriving, and then people who play live poker are just really struggling because there's no live poker, and that's a crucial distinction. Also, I mean, I don't know how it seems to be like there are a lot of big tournaments, and obviously right now there's some big tournaments going on even in New Jersey. But I'm playing some of them, but I've really been focusing on playing cash and learning cash and getting good at cash games. So like tournaments just have not been a real focus of mine. But if and when they do open up, obviously like that'll change. And I'm looking forward to that in theory, but at the same time, because I've been fortunate enough to like have things go pretty well for me and feel like I'm in a good situation, I'm not.
Here comes Viffer.
But I want to be the first one to say that this new guy, Olivier, is a really, really good player. He's running super, super bad. Like, I'm really, really impressed by his play. I ran really good against him, but he's kept himself together. He's playing really good and really solid. I expect to see big things from him in the future, and he's a really, really good player. And I hope I keep running as good as I do for the rest of the week.
There you go. That's the blessing you got from Viffer.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember him saying that, but I don't remember him. Yeah, that was quite nice of him to say. That was very nice. Yeah.
He even added, let me be the first to say this. He was like anticipating future praise.
Anticipating this conversation. No, I mean I mean that kind of stopped me in my tracks when I heard that. It's really nice of him to say. Yeah.
All right,
especially at the time. I mean, he's like, he was Viffer. I mean, he was just like, yeah, he's a well-known, intimidating, good player. So yeah, that was nice to hear.
Legend of the game, Viffer. Viffer, if you're watching, please come join me on the show. We have a lot to talk about. I think your career has been very interesting to dissect a little bit. Olivier, thanks so much for being on the show. We're nearing the end of this episode of Poker After Dark. I really appreciate your openness and your honesty and your story, and would love to do this again sometimes. Maybe we'll pick something that you've won. How about that?
We can pick anything. I'm cool with it. I appreciate you having me on the show. I appreciate you being interested in my story. Thank you, Remco.
Absolutely. For the people who are curious, I will add a description to Olivier's podcast down below on the YouTube feed. So if you're on YouTube, please catch that as well. And start with the first episode. I think it's very important to start with the first episode. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, do all that good stuff. I am back with this show, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday with Scott Blumstein to watch the 2017 main event final table, the epic hand against John Hesp. We're going to finally dissect it once and for all and go through how his life has changed since. He's lost a lot of weight, focused on his health, has totally turned things into a different street as well in a different way than Olivier has. But, there's a lot of work that he's done as well that I'm very eager to dive into with Scott. For Olivier and myself, this was Run It Back, and I will catch you guys on Thursday.